Now the second law is law of equi-marginal utility, which is also called law of maximum satisfaction or law of substitution or Gauss's second law. So do remember what is it also called. It's also called Gauss's second law, law of maximum satisfaction, and also law of substitution. Law of substitution is important here. So what does the law implies? So law says that if a person has a thing which he can put into several uses, he will distribute it between those uses in such a way that it has same marginal utility in all. It was given by Marshall. Now what is important here is that in law of equi-marginal utility we take two goods, more than one good we have to take. Like in law of diminishing marginal utility, we were talking about only one good, but here we are talking about more than one good. That is goods one, they are two goods, X and Y. Okay, and we are studying here how a consumer spends money on both the goods. Okay, so what a consumer does is he tries to gain maximum total utility. And how does he do this? By having marginal utility of both the goods equal. So this is what consumer does. This is in terms of equation, like marginal utility of X by price of X is equal to marginal utility of Y by price of Y, and so on. So what is important to remember is marginal utility of all the goods should be equal. So that is simply equi-marginal utility, and it is shown by this equation. Now what are the assumptions of law of equi-marginal utility? The first assumption is that the taste, preference and income of the consumer remains unchanged. Then the second one is marginal utility of money is constant, as we know that cardinal approach takes this assumption. Then consumer has perfect knowledge of utility and obtain goods and try to seek maximum satisfaction. We can say that the consumer is rational and has full knowledge of market and goods. Then utility is measurable in cardinal terms, as we know that it is explained by cardinal approach. So obviously utility is measurable. Then consumer has many wants. Consumer does not have just want for one good. Now the goods are substitutable and divisible. So what does this means? Like tea and coffee are substitutes, and also goods should be divisible. Like we can divide goods, like we have a dozen apples, so we can divide in one apple, two apples, so it should be divisible. So these are the assumptions. Now what is the practical importance of law of equi-marginal utility? First, it plays an important role in consumption. So a consumer, when he plans to buy something, he always try to obtain equal marginal utility from all the goods. So this law plays an important role in consumption. Then it also play an important role in production. Now a producer allocates his resources in such a way so that he obtain equal marginal value product, which you will study in further chapters, and try to derive equal MVP from all the resources. Then comes marketing. So consumers should try to make a marginal utility of commodity and the price of commodity equal while purchasing a commodity. So this is important. So this law guides consumer in how to spend efficiently. Then comes distribution. We distribute the share in among the factors of production on the basis of MVP. Okay. Then the last one is prices. So in prices, we can take an example. Suppose in a year, onion production faced shortfall. So what will happen? The price of onion will go high. But what happens is consumer will now prefer other vegetables more than onion. So what does it do? The demand of onion declines, and so the prices again becomes down. So this is how the prices comes down. So this is the effect of law of equi-marginal utility. So this was the effect on prices. Now let's study consumer surplus. That is the third law which comes under cardinal approach. The concept of consumer surplus was introduced by Alfred Marshall. So remember this, that consumer surplus concept was given by whom? It was given by Alfred Marshall. So according to him, it is the difference between the amount of money that a consumer actually pays and the amount of money he is willing to pay. Okay, we can explain this by saying that suppose I want to pay 1000 rupees for something, but the price is only 800. So what is the consumer surplus? Here 200 rupees is my consumer surplus. It can also be explained by the following formulas, that is willing to pay, consumer what is willing to pay minus what he actually pays, or we can say total utility minus total amount spent, that is total utility he derives and the amount he spent, then value in use minus value in exchange. We can also say that consumer surplus is inversely proportional to market price. What will happen is what we actually pay increases, so the difference between willing to pay minus actually paying what will decrease, so therefore consumer surplus decreases with market price. So remember this. Now let's try to understand consumer surplus graphically. So here we have y-axis on which there is price, and then x-axis we have unit of commodities. Now this is demand curve, which you will be studying in chapter law of demand. So this is because demand is inversely proportional to price, so demand curve is downward sloping. And this is supply curve, because supply is directly proportional to price, that's why it's upward sloping. Now this is the equilibrium quantity, where supply and demand meets, it becomes equilibrium of that market, and this is equilibrium quantity and this is equilibrium price. Now what the consumer is willing to pay is this much area, and what he is actually paying is this. Now the difference between this and this is a triangle which represents consumer surplus. So this is your consumer surplus graphically. Remember this. So now we are done with cardinal approach. Now let's look at ordinal approach. And the first topic that we have to study is indifference curve. Indifference curve was given by Hicks and Allen. So remember this. Hicks and Allen gave indifference curve. Now what is, I hope you remember what is ordinal approach. Ordinal approach is ranking commodities on the basis of satisfaction derived. Okay. It is not giving measure to the utility. It is rather or ranking the goods. Okay. So what is indifference curve? Indifference curve analysis is based on the assumption of ordinal utility. As we discussed earlier, now only, it explains the behavior of consumer in terms of his preferences or ranking for different combination of goods. Since satisfaction derived from the consumption of various goods cannot be measured objectively, it is enough if consumer indicates his preference for various combination of commodities. Okay, so we have discussed these things just now. So we derive indifference curve from indifference schedule. So first we should know what is indifference schedule. So indifference schedule is basically a list of various combination of two goods arranged in such a way that the satisfaction derived from each combination will be equal to one another. Okay. So basically it's a list of X and Y commodity where we will be writing the quantity, and the satisfaction derived from them will be equal in each combination. So that is indifference schedule. When we plot the graph between X and Y, we get indifference curve. And when a set of indifference curve is taken together, like 1, 2, 3, 4 indifference curves taken together, then it forms indifference map. So remember this: indifference schedule, then forms indifference curve, and 1 or 2, 3 indifference curve forms indifference map, which gives the overall taste of a individual consumer. Okay. Now important point to remember is that all the combinations on indifference curve locus are equally satisfactory to the consumer. So every point on this curve will have equal amount of satisfaction. Okay, so this is indifference curve where we have good Y and good X on the X and Y axis, and this is indifference curve. So what we mean to say that on every point the satisfaction derived will be equal. Now properties of indifference curve. First one is that indifference curve is convex to origin. This is very important. As we can see, it is convex to origin. Then slope of indifference curve is declining as we move along the curve from left to downwards. This is because the marginal rate of substitution of good is diminishing. So what is marginal rate of substitution? It is MRS, we can say, is the exchangeability between the two goods preferred is MRS. Okay, we will study in the next slide. But for now, remember that the slope is declining. Now indifference curve has negative slope. It's the same point. Now also an important point is that indifference curve do not intersect. Like two indifference curve will never intersect. If it intersect, then it means that at same level there will be different level of satisfaction at same point. So it's not possible. So indifference curve never intersect. So remember these 4 points. These are the properties of indifference curve, and many times questions is asked that indifference curve is convex to origin and its slope is negative and they never intersect. Now another property is an indifference curve that lies to the right of another denotes higher utility, and combination of goods on higher indifference curve are preferred by the consumer. So we can see this graphically. Now suppose we have the various combination like I1, I2 and I3. Now here we will say I1 will be greater than I2 than I3. It means that it shows the level of satisfaction. I1 is higher, so its satisfaction level is more than I2 than I3. So this is the order. Okay, so now let's try to, now another term is marginal rate of substitution, as we know that it is slope of indifference curve. So marginal rate of substitution is the rate of exchangeability between the two goods which are equally preferred. So it tells us that how much amount of, suppose, good X we have to reduce to gain another good Y. So this is your marginal rate of substitution, and marginal rate of substitution is negative. Okay, so next is budget line. It is another topic. Now budget line is represents various combination of two commodities which can be purchased by a consumer at given income level and market price. Budget line is an important element of consumer behavior analysis. So what budget line simply says is it is putting income level as a constraint. Okay, we have money fixed. We cannot buy if we have unlimited money, we can buy at any combination. But when we put income level as a constraint and market price as a constraint, then comes budget line. So this is budget line, and it is giving you the combination if income and market price is given. So this is budget line. Now budget line we can see in the graph, good X, good Y is given, and this is budget line. It is a straight line declining. So this is budget line. Now the properties of budget line. The properties of budget line, first, it's a straight line that indicates that budget line shows the market exchange rate for every combination. Then it has negative slope, which shows that it is inversely, there is inverse relation between the two commodities purchased. Like if I'll buy more of X, then I will automatically have to purchase less of Y. So it indicates inverse relation between the two commodities. And then also important point is that the slope of budget line indicates what? It indicates price ratio of the two goods. Remember this, it is very important. So slope of indifference curve represent MRS, that is marginal rate of substitution, and slope of budget line indicates price ratio of the two commodities. And so it is important that when the fourth point is that indifference curve tangent, the indifference curve creates consumer equilibrium in the point that at the point where it touches budget line. So graphically you can see this is indifference curve and this is budget line, and the point where they meet is your consumer's equilibrium. So it is very important. And at consumer equilibrium, what happens is MRS becomes equal to price ratio of the two commodities. The same concept you will study in production economics. So this concept is very important. Remember this. So equation wise we can say that dy by dx, that is your slope of indifference curve, is equal to px by py. So when they are equal, then it's consumer equilibrium. So this was about budget line and then indifference curve. And we also got to know about consumer equilibrium. Okay, so now let's move forward. And now here comes two concepts, that is perfect substitutes and perfect complements. So we have to study indifference curve of perfect substitutes and perfect complements. First, we should know what is perfect substitutes and what is perfect complements. Perfect substitutes are goods which are identical, like tea and coffee are perfect substitutes. Both are used for the same purpose. So tea and coffee are perfect substitutes. Another example can be Coke and Pepsi are perfect substitutes, or any cold drink are perfect substitute. Why? Because they have identical utility, so they are perfect substitutes. Then comes perfect complements. Now perfect complements are goods which you will like to purchase together, like bread and butter. You won't buy butter if you don't have bread. Or we can also give another example, a perfect example better than this. There's shoe. We buy a pair of shoe, like right shoe and left shoe. We don't buy right shoe and we don't buy left shoe. So we buy both, right? So this is an example of perfect complements. Now let's look at the indifference curve of perfect substitutes and perfect complements. So perfect substitutes, the indifference curve is declining, negative slope from left to right. So this is perfect substitutes graph. As you can say, we are replacing. So if we increase the quantity of x, then we have to decrease the quantity of y. So this is obvious. Then comes a indifference curve of perfect complements, which is L-shaped. So remember this, it is L-shaped and it is important. The question here arises is why it is L-shaped. So the reason for this is that marginal rate of substitution should be constant for perfect complements. Okay, so it can either be infinity or it can be zero. So therefore it is L-shaped, or we can say right angle shape, because MRS can be either 0 or can be infinity. So that's why it is L-shaped. Or we can also say that suppose I have two pair of shoes, okay, one pair of shoe. Now if I buy another right pair of shoe, will the satisfaction level increase? No, it will be the same. So if I increase the quantity of x, keeping the quantity of y constant, the satisfaction level will be the same, which was without even increasing. That's why it's L-shaped. So satisfaction level, suppose here, so this will only remain the satisfaction level, it won't increase, right? So that's why in perfect complement it's L-shaped. Now the last topic for today's lecture video is income consumption curve. Income consumption curve. Let's start income consumption curve. So income consumption curve is the curve that shows equilibrium quantities of two commodities that would be purchased by buyer at different level of income, keeping the prices the same. So we can say that it tells it is a curve formed by the equilibrium, that consumer equilibrium that we studied in but that we formed from budget line and indifference curve. So you remember that we formed a consumer equilibrium. So what is income consumption curve? It is when we take different income level, then we'll get different consumer equilibrium. So when we match all these consumer equilibrium, we'll get a curve. So this curve is income consumption curve. All right. So we can also say that income consumption curve is a curve which shows the point of consumer equilibrium resulting from various level of money, income, and constant prices. So this is income consumption curve. So this is budget 1, budget 2, budget 3, and then we have indifference curve 1. From indifference curve 1 and budget 1 we get equilibrium 1. Then from budget 2 and indifference curve 2 we get equilibrium 2, then equilibrium 3, and when we match all these points we get income consumption curve. Now income consumption curve is analogous to expansion path in production economics. So this year a question was asked from this. So in production economics there is expansion path, and similar, almost everything is similar. What is indifference? There is same concept as indifference curve, same concept as budget line, and we also form a expansion path just like income consumption curve. So it is very important. I hope you get what is income consumption curve. So I hope your concepts got clear, and in this video I try to cover your LDMU, LEMU, then ICC, indifference curve, budget line. So in next video one topic is left, that is Engel's family curve, and I'll try to cover in next video. But before that we need to know the concepts of normal good, luxury good, necessities. So I will make a separate video and then we'll discuss Engel curve. After that, completing that, I'll start law of demand, law of supply. Okay, so stay tuned to the channel. Thank you for staying till the end, and if you like the video, please like, comment, share, and Don't forget to subscribe and also press the notification bell so that you don't miss any update. Okay, so see you in the next video.